Okay, just welcome everybody. Welcome Cece. I guess we can quickly do introductions if that works, since we're a small group, and just let Cece know who you are. Christina, you're at the top of my screen. You want to start and then pass it to somebody?
Sure. Hi, Cece. Great to meet you. I live over off of 1A, over by the Parker River. And yeah, I have been an environmental consultant for many years, and I'm now in renewable energy development and super excited to be helping out to update this plan. And I'll pass it over to Jim and Ella because they're right next to me.
Okay. Thank you, Christina. So, hi, CC, Jim Dooling. I live on Orchard Street, so essentially between 95 and Route 1, also pretty close to the Parker River. And I'm a citizen who's interested in the work of the Open Space Committee, not yet an official member, and seeing how this all plays out.
Yep. I'm Ella. I also live here on Orchard Street. I'm interning in the planning department once a week, so I sort of joined in this, and obviously my dad is sort of brought me in too, and I'm just learning more about what they're doing, and hopefully I can help out a little bit more this summer.
Awesome.
Okay. I guess David's on the other side of us, so I guess going around the table. Yeah.
Right. Hi, I'm David Powell. I live in Byfield, right next door to the town offices, which are right next door to 95. And okay, quick rundown. I was involved in the open space plan back in 2000, what is it, 8, 9, 10, that part of it. I was a member of the planning board. I was also a Newbury MVPC commissioner. I'm a member of Greenbelt and a property steward for Old Town Hill. I think I'll stop there.
I'll go next. Hi, CC, Bill Hoffman. I'm married to Christina, so live down here on the Lower Green. Relatively new to Newbury. I've been living here a little over 7 years, but I worked for the Division of Marine Fisheries out of Gloucester, and so I've been in the area for 24, 25 years, and just love this area. So we're new to the town, and we're just trying to do something for the town, try to protect some of these open spaces and areas that we really enjoy to use. And Mike just got on. I don't know if you know Mike. Hey, Mike. We're doing a round of introductions.
How's it going, everybody? Sorry for my late arrival here. Go ahead.
You're right on time, Mike.
Perfect. Thank you. My name is Mike Carboni. I've lived in Newbury most of my life. I grew up on Scotland Road over here, and I'm back in this area. I've been back in this area for a long time and have been on and off the Open Space Committee for a number of years now. I work for the Essex County Greenbelt Association as well.
Awesome. Cece knows Martha and me.
Yeah, it's great to meet you all. Thank you for the quick round of intros. I'm happy to do an intro too, Kristen. Is that warranted? Okay.
Sure. Great.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you. I'm Cece Gerstenbacher. I'm the environmental program manager with the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. It sounds like a number of you have interfaced with our group one way or another, whether you're doing walk audits with Kristen, or through the Greenbelt, or as a former commissioner. So hopefully our organization doesn't need too much intro, but we're the regional planning agency in the Merrimack Valley area, and we offer a variety of services and support, including help for open space planning committees and for open space plan development. So that's why I'm here today.
Just a quick plug, Cece also helped us get the Green Communities application over the line and our designation. Now we're working on our grant application. So, and I'll just say, I think, speaking for myself, I've been working with MVPC ever since I started here, which is 15 and a half years ago. And it would be, in my opinion, impossible to do this job without the help of everybody at MVPC. So,
Thank you, Martha. We appreciate it. We do it for you.
we appreciate it.
Awesome. Here we are, we're getting going with updating the plan. We, as a committee, have talked about, have reviewed the plan, CC, and looked through the components of it. A number of the folks, as you heard, have been involved in the previous updates. So we think we're a good team. We're ready to go. We're gonna try to attract some more folks. But we also think it would be super helpful to have somebody who's, helping us keep on track, do the things we may not have the resources or skill set to do on our own, like GIS and other things. And we know how great you guys are. You helped with, MVPC helped with a lot of the maps for the master plan, which we just completed. I just was doing like a side-by-side of the maps required for the open space rec plan and the maps we did for the master plan, and they're almost identical. So I think we're actually in really good shape for mapping, but there'll be, some work there. And then also, the public engagement and outreach is a big piece. We've talked about property assessments. So when Martha and I had a brief conversation with CC last week, she mentioned that, obviously they provide the service to help as consultants for towns who are working on their open space plans. And she shared the Georgetown scope of work. So that's enough of me talking. I just want to, I guess, sort of open the discussion of, I don't know, Cece, if you want to sort of go through some of the tasks that you've provided other towns in helping with the open space plan. And then if the committee members have questions about like how it would work if Newbury were to partner with you, we can just have a discussion.
Sure. Yeah, I'll go through kind of the most robust level in which we could be involved, and then we can sort of pare it down from there, which Kristen is kind of that document that I shared you with Georgetown. So I'm just going to walk through it verbally. And I'm kind of going to go chronologically. That's just how I write my scopes of work. So the first thing that we would, of course, need to do before really getting involved in the open space update is to just review the old open space plan. It's a pretty low profile task, but I would need to sit down and spend some hours digging into the, I'm sure, several 100-page document and get into that. And that's just kind of a prerequisite for any work that we would need to do. My team would need to get into that document. Another component of our assistance that could exist kind of throughout the life of this plan update is the attendance at meetings like this. Attendance at planning meetings, helping facilitate them. Again, you folks are the committee, so I'm very deferential to you and when you can meet. If you want me at every planning meeting, if you don't, the scope can be flexible there. But happy to attend or help, figure out a time to meet, things of that nature. In that similar vein, also happy to participate or facilitate public outreach to the extent that you folks are interested. There's certain public outreach milestones that you have to check. There's a couple public meetings, there's a survey, that's all required for this open space plan update, but you're also more than welcome to go above and beyond that to the extent that you're interested, and we'll kind of go as much as you want us to. I think there's a real role for open space committees to lead some of the public outreach themselves because they are citizens in their community, and I think it's gone really well seeing you folks be champions of some of that outreach. But to the extent that you need help facilitating meetings or making presentation material or delivering things, making surveys, things of that nature, we're always there for that. Kristen mentioned data and maps. We have helped out pretty robustly with a full overhaul of any and all maps that you might need for this update. It sounds like you might be in pretty good shape there, but I would bet you would want Steve and our GIS team to take a spin through the maps just to make sure they're up to speed and all kosher with what is required for an open space update. And I think there are about 10 maps total that are required for an open space plan update. And then on top of that, you probably have a lot of this information too, Kristen, from the master plan update, but you'll need some information on demographics and population. That's stuff that we have readily available and are happy to help you update some of that information if you'd like us to. On top of that, we can help with the actual writing of the plan itself. Again, I think that's a great area for the open space committee itself to tap into. It sounded like when I talked to Kristen that some of you had claimed certain sections and we're starting to maybe build them out. Some of the open space plan doesn't really need to be revised. Again, some of it's a lot of historical context, so it kind of stays the same over time. But in some of those sections where you're building more narrative out, or you just want to make sure that you're kind of checking all the narrative requirements through the state, more than happy to tap in there or really help you build out narrative in places where you feel like you're not comfortable writing. Similarly with the action plan development, I think that's a place where local knowledge is essential. I can certainly not make up your action plan, but I can provide regional insights and talk maybe about what other communities have done, help you format it, make sure it's checking all those boxes at the state level. And then finally, just give a big old final review of the document itself, make sure it is checking all state requirements. It's likely that you'll probably go back and forth when the time comes with the state once or twice. There's always something in a several hundred-page document that somebody misses. So happy to kind of tag along for those revisions too and make sure you guys are comfortable interacting with the state and getting the plan formalized. So those are all the many ways in which I can provide assistance. Again, it's kind of the whole planning process, but it's really up to you folks how you want us to be engaged, to what extent. Very flexible there.
Yes,
Awesome.
Susie. I've got one question for you. Since you know our natural resources section in the master plan, how much of that do you think we can utilize for the open space plan?
Probably a good bit of it. I'd have to look at what your open space plan looks like right now and how much would need to be updated, but I would almost guarantee you could just marry the two of those sections. And then we'll kind of walk through the there's a workbook for open space plans at the state level and just walk through and make sure it's checking all those boxes, but you're probably 85% there with those sections.
Thanks.
Thanks, Cece, for that overview. In looking at thanks for sharing the scope of work that you had put together for Georgetown. And it looked like in terms of developing the narrative, you were sort of, playing like a little less hands-on role, the way the scope is written, like more guiding and then letting the commission members actually update the narrative of those sections.
Yep.
So like give us a sense as to whether that for that particular task, is that level of effort kind of on the low end for what you offer, the middle end, or is that, you can offer a lot more that would go to a high end? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of dependent on what the committee would look for us for. We can certainly offer a high-end level of support there in writing some of those narrative components. I think it is nice to have some sort of committee participation in the development of the narrative itself, especially the action plan. But to the extent that maybe we're together writing down notes and bullets, and then it's something that MVPC formalizes on the back end as a cohesive narrative, that's always an option. I would want your input at the end of the day, but I can kind of scale my engagement. I'm very familiar and comfortable with writing plans like this. It's not a huge lift, even if we were to do the majority of the narrative.
Okay. Yeah, I think we've seen a bunch of places that, we could refresh the text, but then also debating over whether we need to refresh the text or whether what was written in the master plan could actually just come in and replace it, as opposed to like following, picking up on some of the trends that were discussed. Maybe all those trends, we don't have to kind of report out on what's going on with those. It was so long ago, maybe we just start with what the master plan had, which is like a very different conversation in terms of writing the narrative, in particular on that sort of long section about the environmental resources and whatnot. So
yeah, I think it'll be a marrying of those two documents. And again, you guys have better eyes on your community than me. So I would look to an extent for your insights on, hey, this doesn't feel like it represents this well anymore. This open space document is ancient. Let's replace this text with master plan narrative. And then it would be on me to say, okay, this it either achieves or does not achieve compliance with this text alone.
Great.
When you
Thanks.
worked with towns on the action plan piece, I was kind of looking at that a little bit this afternoon, thinking. And kind of the same idea of what Christina was saying, which is. Like, you throw the whole thing out and like start again, with this sort of.
Yeah, I
Pretty
would
different
actually-
climate than, the
Right.
last time this was done, which was almost, I don't know, just whatever, 10 years ago, more than 10 years
Yeah.
ago, so.
Yeah.
Like developing action items is sort of like. That's huge, right? Like you could kind of go in a lot of different directions. I know the survey is supposed to guide you, and then obviously the assessments you're doing on what the needs are, but. Seemed like a lot of questions around how you'd actually develop the action items.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably quite a combination of things. I would say because your open space plan is so old, I wouldn't trash your old actions. I think they can be insightful in some way and at least a building block. I'm kind of thinking about what we're doing right now, Kristen, with the hazard mitigation plan and looking at those actions that are 6, 7 years ago when the plan didn't even consider climate change. And some of those actions are still relevant. Some of those actions can be revised and updated. Some of them are dropped completely or they're complete in some way, but I think they're a good building block. I would also highly recommend checking out the actions of plans that have just completed for some ideas. Boxford just completed their open space plan. That was something I was involved in. And I think some of their actions would probably mirror similar actions to what Newbury might be interested in. I think that there's just a constant posting of open space plans on the state website as they get approved. So to the extent that you need to kind of jog your own ideas, I wouldn't expect you to come up with every solution to every problem just amongst yourselves in this group. But I think a combination of just checking out where you were last in the plan, even if it might be more or less relevant. Checking out the survey, checking out your site assessments and what the flavor of the community is. You folks are community members. Maybe there's something that you really feel like you would want to champion as an action. And that to me makes it important if community members care about it. So that's value in and of itself. And then maybe fill in the gaps by checking out some other plans that have been completed recently in communities similar to your own. See if it jogs any new ideas.
One of the things that we did when we first started the master plan update was to go through the 2006 plan and look at each of those action items to see what had been done. And, basically, as you're saying, you guys have been doing with the hazard mitigation plan, but that was a useful jumping off point and kind of a useful way to dive into the document.
Yeah, well, that's pretty basic, I would think, right? In any
Yeah,
kind
should be, yeah.
updating a plan is you want to look at what you had planned whenever it was 10 years before, 5 years before, whatever, and whether you hit any of those goals, none of those goals, whatever. I'd be interested, Sari, in your experience of the state's response here, because, okay, you've obviously been involved recently with Boxford, and I think we were involved with Rowley at all.
I was not, no.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, one of the things I notice is the workbook which the state puts out, right?
Mhm.
Is now, do my math here, I think 16 years
It's
old.
outdated, right? Yeah.
Yes, and in fact, it's even older than that because it's still, and I cannot imagine why, has Deval Patrick's name at the front of it from 1991, or somewhere in there. Anyway, my question is the state still heavy into print and verbal and bound copies and all the rest of it, or have they now arrived at a world where essentially most of this needs to be electronic?
Yep, the latter is correct. There only needs to be electronic copies of the open space plan as far as my knowledge goes. This, at the end of the process, all you do is submit an email to the state, to Melissa Cran is her name. She's been decently responsive. I found that she's a little bit more responsive to me than she is like a random Hotmail email that might be coming from an open space committee
Right.
member. So if you need to get a hold of her, that's always a place you can tag me. And most of the edits that we've gotten back so far have been very like, I wouldn't say nitpicky, but kind of in the weeds logistical about the plan itself. I think we've been able to cover very high level the requirements of the open space plan, but there might be a legend on a map that's wrong, or maybe this table's not formatted correctly. Those are kind of the responses that I'm getting back from
So,
at least.
yeah, so basic responses of running up a flag and showing they're earning their wage,
Yep,
right?
pretty much.
Yeah, right. So my follow-up question would be, has that meant that better and more up-to-date information now is sort of part of the expectations in a submission? And I'm thinking of some of the concerns that an earlier meeting that Christina had about the fact that every now and then when you read what we have in various places, it's clearly not only out of date, but its references are often, not contemporary in terms of what we know, for example, about sea level rise, what we know
Yes.
about
Yep.
degradation of the marsh and so on.
Yep. Those are things that you would absolutely expect to update, and those are data points that folks at MVPC can help you with. I would say also demographic data. We have the 2020 census, and that's the data that we're relying on for that. They won't expect it to be any more up to date than that. But yeah, as far as climate change statistics go, I think the more up to date we are, the better we are ourselves, and the better
Mhm.
that the state will receive the plan.
And do you also get the impression that I've always had that the local regional planning authorities' role is indeed one that should be adjunct to its communities, and therefore, if we are very actively involved with you, that's a real plus in terms of the state knowing that they're looking at data and revision and review that comes from somebody with your experience.
I mean, I wouldn't sell myself too highly, but yeah,
No.
I would absolutely say I think there's an expectation whenever you're submitting an open space plan to have at least a letter of support from a regional planning agency at the very minimum, which means at the very minimum, we would have to review this plan to some extent. And I think knowing that a lot of these committees are volunteer only and are only able to dedicate a certain amount of time, being able to point to somebody on the ground who is doing this as a day job as kind of a resource is always beneficial. Whether that's a consultant or MVPC, I'm partial to MVPC because we are a lot cheaper.
Yeah, well, so am I.
So, tapping into that, I think that our rough approximate schedule is to kind of dive in a little deeper after the end of the summer, like maybe in the fall timeframe, winter timeframe. So what is MVPC kind of got on the docket? Would there be room? Would you guys have enough manpower to help us out on this when we needed it?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. As long as you give us enough heads up, there's really not a project that I turn away from our environmental program. Especially these projects that are required at the state level for you folks. I think they're essential and we'd want to be involved in it. If giving me a heads up that it's in the fall is more than enough time to make sure that we kind of shuffle our requirements around and make sure that we're available. I would say that we've been spending a good bit of time even on Newberry's Green Communities designation and their designation grant. That's all stuff that will ramp down in June or July, at least my participation in it, which frees up quite a few hours a week for me just in that alone. The hazard mitigation plan will be ramping down. So quite a lot of our things are kind of coming to an end in the fall, and I think it'll be a good time to start some new projects.
So I think that the one-stop timeline is that, like, we need to get our application in by June 5th. But then I think the awards aren't until late
Right.
summer and kick off projects in the fall, it takes a little while to go through all that.
Yeah.
So that would kind of align with, capacity at our end. We were talking a little bit as a committee about whether just sort of the survey work and the engagement work and whether there'd be any opportunities this summer to and actually, I don't know if you know any communities who've done more than one survey, because we were sort of floating that, like an initial, what do you think about open space? How do you use the open space? Some general-ish questions, and then maybe later on, once we develop the action plan, I was thinking that would be more of a time to kind of prioritize like things, I don't know how
No, I think
much
that's a more robust way to do it.
surveying.
It's definitely a more robust way to do it. Again,
Yeah.
it's kind of up to folks' capacity because administering that
Yeah.
survey is not just an MVPC task. We don't have the same connections to the community that you guys do. We can help on the back end create it, but at the end of the day, you guys can send out mailers and people in the community, and that's kind of
Have
the way.
you just used like Google surveys, or what do
Yeah.
people use now?
Yep,
Yeah.
I would recommend using a Google or a Microsoft survey, and you can develop a concurrent flyer with it that has a QR code and a link. You can post that digitally. You can send it out in like water bills or something of that nature. You can disseminate it a variety of ways, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
that's what we've used, a digital survey that folks can access online.
And if people are just doing one survey, when do they usually do it? Do you know?
It's
should know
towards
that.
the end, probably when you are done writing the narrative component, but before you're really diving into the action plan component. So you use your knowledge that you've gained from the new demographics and the new data on sea level rise, climate change, to develop the survey. And then in turn, that helps you develop the action plan items. And then you would bring all of that to a public meeting where folks would have some more input.
Great. Anybody else have questions?
I just had one more question, just in terms of the trends of other towns that are putting these together and whether, there is an expectation, if the state has provided any like insights on whether we should or kind of should not go heavy or light or at all in terms of the, climate change and resiliency. What's the trend there?
I would say heavier than lighter is best. The trends at the state and federal level right now are environmental justice and climate resiliency. So you're going to want to elevate both of those topics in your plan. And environmental justice can mean a slew of different things depending on what community you're in. For you folks, it might mean making open space accessible to elderly populations. So as long as you're kind of acknowledging it in your community, that's the way to go. But yes, the trend is acknowledge it. I think the state and the federal level of government expects it at this point.
Okay, thanks.
So the one-stop application asks, do you have a cost estimate or proposal from a prospective consultant for this project? Is that should we try to get that from you in the next week and a half?
I would say if you need me to change, so if you're comfortable with the level of involvement that I've proposed, of course we can flux. But if you want me to change some of the verbiage around in the town of Georgetown's one, just so you have something to attach to the one-stop application, so it's complete, that is probably a pretty solid estimate for our participation if you're looking for the level of participation that I talked about today. So I can get you that, Kristen, if you need to. That wouldn't take me too long.
Okay. That's great. Yeah.
And then if you need to revise it, I'll probably knock the maps down a little bit because it sounds like you have some of those done already. Yeah, the numbers don't need to be set in stone, but it's at least a cost estimate, which is what they're looking for.
Yeah, it doesn't say it's required, but I
Okay.
think, you know, obviously we have to develop a budget anyway, so we're gonna have to be like doing it anyway, so, if that, you know, maybe we can talk as a committee and just, you
Yeah,
know,
of course.
make sure we feel good about this approach, and, yeah, and I mean, in general, I think that Georgetown scope made sense, you know, it's a pretty
Yep.
straightforward
It's kinda
project,
cut
what
and
the
dry.
state's looking for, so, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Any other thoughts?
So how are we going to sort of proceed at this point? Are you're have the deadline in what, early June for this submittal to the state?
Yeah, well, why don't we let Cece go if you wanna like hop on to the rest of your life? And then we can kind of circle up with next steps, if that makes sense.
All right, that sounds good. Chris,
Awesome.
then I can get you this. When would you like this? I have a couple grant applications due on Friday is the only reason I ask.
Yeah, I think Monday, early next week is fine if that works. Yeah,
Yep,
we
sounds
can use what we have for now and then.
Yeah, honestly, I'm just gonna change the names probably and take off the DLTA hours, and that's that's all we're looking at. So I can do it. I'll just want to make sure I fit in the time when you need it.
That sounds
Okay.
great.
Sounds good.
I guess
Well,
Monday's
thank
a
you.
holiday anyway, so
Yeah,
so we
that's
won't be
okay.
here Monday.
Not
Awesome.
anyway.
Okay.
But thank you folks for having me. Have a nice evening, and I look forward to working with you soon.
Thanks, Cece. Nice to meet you.
Thanks.
You too.
Great.
Bye.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, Cece. It's like so weird to be on Zoom. Yeah, every time. So any other thoughts, discussion? Does this seem like a good approach?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think it seems like a great approach. I'm wondering if, you know, there were some, we talked about like just even printing out materials, and I didn't want to go like too into detail about their proposal for Georgetown and, you know, what it included. And so I just want to be conscious of, you put in a ballpark estimate when you just sort of said, hey, one stop, we want to, you know, we're looking for updating our plan. And so I feel like it might be realistic for us to kind of build out like, okay, here's how much will go to Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, or here's how much will go to a consultant. And then like, what other costs do we need? And if we need to line those up and out so that we get up to the total number that you had, which I forget, was it 60?
We put 60 in, which, you know, is more than enough. Right, Georgetown was 30, I think.
35.
But I certainly think, to your point, like it doesn't have to all be, I mean, Newbury is a small town, you know, so 60 seemed like a lot to me, but David's advice was just kind of go high and they might cut you down anyway. So I think if you just, any line item we put into the budget, if we just, you know, add on a little bit, it might end up being slightly less than that. So, but yes, I mean, great question of like, what other things besides consultant services do we think we'll need?
Yeah, like we had talked about, you know, doing some outreach, and then if we wanted to have some printed materials, you know, I guess I also didn't get to go too into depth on the survey that she might recommend that we use, and whether it's a paid version or not a paid version. And if the paid version, if she didn't include a paid version, but a paid version would give you all the statistics and like a way to be able to really tweak the data as you need to, then maybe we could have that, we could ask that question and include a line item for that. Just off the top of my head, refreshments at the, I don't know, they're like, who knows? I'm just trying to think of silly line items that we know we just don't want to forget, because then all of a sudden we'll be in a spot.
Right, like if we want to send out a card with the QR code and stuff like that, you know, that's
Yeah.
price. You know, we did that for the master plan. The other thing that CC, we talked with CC about, and they don't do, is we do need to do the ADA assessment. So, you know, whether there's another consultant that we would bring in to do that, or if we know somebody who would be qualified to do that, because it is a chunk of work. And
That's
that's a-
interesting. So they're gonna review, help me understand what their scope is. Which aspect would they be reviewing?
For the ADA assessment.
Yeah, for the American Disabilities Act, is it like looking at trails? Is it looking at open space, recreation?
It's basically the one that we did before was, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, but I think it, it covered all the town facilities and, the green, the playing fields, other stuff. I'm gonna see if I can pull it.
Yeah,
I think it's reviewing town property that's used as open space
Yeah.
and recreation, but whether it's all the open
Isn't
space.
the, Christina, a prescribed process by ADA? Basically, that you have to look at all your facilities. There's a form. I mean, if you look at any of these, in fact, the one thing the workbook does have is a fairly extensive review of the ADA requirements. And my guess would be that a lot of that data probably is much the same now as it was when there was that ADA was last done. And I don't know, Martha, was the ADA that we have on record, is that from 2008-10 or is it more recent?
No, it's from the last version, so 2009, 2010. And it's the one that Marlene did. And there's a brief description of all the town-owned facilities, and then if there are improvements that need to be made, what the transition plan would be, who would be responsible for making those changes. There are some new ones to add to the list, because now we have public bathrooms at Plum Island, so I think David's right. A lot of it is probably pretty much the same, because I don't think the ADA requirements have changed significantly, but there would be some new ones to take a look at.
Excuse me, sorry, I thought I was muted. I was coughing. It says, I was trying to remember which type of town-owned facilities we're talking about, and it does explicitly say, facilities under the jurisdiction of the Recreation Department or the Conservation Commission. So that's actually pretty discreet and
Yeah,
probably not a lot. I mean, there's like all the trails and CRs are under the care of the Conservation Commission, but like not the bathrooms, not the parking lots. I know Mantor Fields did an ADA assessment of in their recent master plan of that parcel. So that's probably the biggest one. And frankly, I just was looking at it. It was really lame. It said like, there's nothing accessible about this, and then it just talked about handicap parking spaces and how they need to be paved and there need to be 6 of them because it's proportional. But there was it was a review and there were criteria that was used. So anyway, yeah, Martha and I have been sort of asking people and we haven't found who actually does that. I think when I worked with Ipswich, it was also done by like a volunteer. In conjunction with the ADA compliance officer, which is generally the building commissioner or building inspector, but.
Well, if I remember correctly, your submission has to actually be endorsed by whoever is your ADA compliance officer. They actually have to sit down and read it. One of the things that strikes me is that we are looking at, I think, a major issue here, and that is from a lot of perspectives, but the access issue, I think, surfaces, and that is Plum Island. Because Plum Island right now, even access to the beach is difficult for the abled, let alone the less abled, put it that way, and the provisions for that are fairly miserable, I would say, and I would think just off the top of my head, the last time I drove around there, I think is one of the areas where we really need to look at that as a fairly major priority in a plan like this. And it may not have simple answers, far from it, because there was a fairly reasonable attempt. I don't know how many of you have been down there lately, but there was an attempt to get emergency vehicle access way down beyond Blue, essentially where the houses run out. And right now you could probably break your neck because it's been undermined. And that's true of many of the other access points along the beach. So that's the kind of an issue I think that we are going to need to be prepared to perhaps go a little further afield to get some advice and some feedback. I'm not sure about that, but my instinct tells me. I don't know whether, what's his name, Ron the Plum Island man.
Oh, Ron Barrett.
Yes, is he still king of the walk, or?
I haven't seen him for a while, but I think he's still probably a major figure down there.
Because he was very much involved years ago in actually pressing for beach access through existing rights of way and this kind of stuff, all of which I think does play into the particular public open space that we have.
Yeah, we had, I'm just looking at the section that we had on the Plum Island Center Beach. I won't read it all to you, but basically there were a lot of things in play at that point, like renourishing the beach with sand and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It talked about the parking spaces, the portable toilets, and the transition plan says, until plans have been finalized regarding the stability and accessibility of the beach, it's not feasible to make transitional plans. So we kind of kicked it down the road
Right.
at that.
Yeah.
Well, it may be the case that the things we have to do for the plan, which are pretty explicit about properties in care, custody, and control of CONSCOM or recreation, might not trigger a full assessment of accessibility to the beach. But I certainly would imagine we all would agree and would come into a high priority on an action about accessibility to the beach. We don't have any now. And so, an action item kind of taking a higher priority, but it may not actually be like, we have to figure out what that is as a part of the plan.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like a little bit, depending on, like you said, I'm not familiar with which facilities are, managed by which entities, but taking that as a first cut. So someone mentioned somebody named Marlene, and now I've forgotten. Is Marlene? Who's Marlene?
Oh, it's Marlene Schrader, and she was very involved in the open space plan. She has passed away, so she's
That's
not.
right. I remember that name now. Okay, I was just wondering, I'm happy to volunteer with somebody who actually knows the ADA regulations. So I'm happy to go from, spot to spot, accompanied by somebody who actually knows the regs. So if we have that person, and if
Yeah.
we
Okay.
think there's going to be any money in it, then we can make it a line item as part of our budget here for the immediate task.
Yeah, I'll put it on my list to just kind of poke around and ask some other towns and try to see and if we should have a little budget related to it. I think we probably should. So postcards, I think that's a good idea. Another way to get the QR code out for the survey. We can look at what it cost us when we did the postcard for the master plan. Put that in. Other printing. I don't know, probably minimal. I mean, if MVPC can include like maps or, materials for the public meetings, we generally rely on them to print like posters, that kind of stuff for different projects.
Yeah, I think if we just have a category for printed materials, and we can just list off that we've got like 2 public meetings and we're gonna do some outreach on, XYZ events or something, and we need postcards to mail as mailers, and if we want to put anything in the water bills, I feel like just having a printed materials category and take whatever the postcards cost and multiply it by 4 or 5 or something, then that would give us enough to do like 4 or 5 things over the course of the next year.
Yeah, we may want to think of at least a couple of printed copies as well for the public to review, people who can't, get access these things on their computers as easily. We did that we had one at town hall and one at the library for the master plan.
That makes sense, both the draft and the final.
Do we have any idea, or can we break out a figure from the master plan in terms of what the kind of outreach and survey costs were, or is that all wrapped into the consultant? Not can you break it out and know that that it was X $1,000 to do that?
We've got those invoices. We paid for those separately from the consultant, so we can extrapolate from that.
I was gonna say, because that would seem to me to be the way to sort of plug in some kind of interim meaningful figure into this, right? In what you're putting together now, that we would expect to spend X doing Y.
Yeah, I think that's we'll definitely do that. So I think we're in good shape. Go ahead, Jen.
Just kind of related to surveys, but like if there's output as we go through the different activities here and, assume that there's townspeople are getting actively involved and interested in this, is the assumption that like any documents that we may want them to see, not talking about documents that necessarily are in the plan, but just information or maybe it is actually assets and things that will go in the plan, but like, do those all get hosted on the town website? Like, is the assumption that like what you've been sharing so far, is that how it works? Just curious about that.
I mean, we certainly have access to posting things on the Open Space Committee's page and sort of doing news blasts and getting people to come to that landing spot. But I don't know if this is where you were going, but what you were just saying was making me think about an earlier conversation we had about just making this information like highly accessible to people, right? Like the trails and the properties and like just getting people, like a nicer website than what our current capacity is.
I guess that's kind of what I was alluding to, and that, it's a project, right? And it's like, how do you present it in a way that's organized, easily accessible online, and kind of, but it doesn't have to be anything major. Obviously you can, with Google Drive or other things, just throw these things up, but I didn't know if there was anything there that I'm familiar with what the town has in terms of platforms beyond just putting links on the website, stuff like that. So
not much.
right.
But I think it's a good point, and I think it's like, we're going for this grant, like, maybe we can just do a line item that says, like, enhancing the open space website. And then we put in, like, I don't know, hiring Ella to like make a really cool, wiki page or something, I don't know, but I think I'm sort of thinking like we can say we have to complete the open space update and that's our priority. That's our goal, is to get an active plan approved by the state, blah, blah, blah. In addition to that, I'll read through the grant, criteria a little more. I don't want to dilute our primary thing, but if there's a way to kind of identify that as like an added, a bonus element of our project, why not? I didn't really include that in the expression of interest, but I think it's obviously related, and would be awesome.
I don't know if anybody else just noticed, but the lightning just flashed on everybody's screens like at the same time. So it's almost like I could see the lightning going across the town.
It is dumping over here right now. Absolutely dumping out.
Close any windows if you are. That's what I just went to do because there was rain pouring in.
Well, it was dumping here and now the sky is like turning yellow and bright.
Orange.
It's like amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the
So-
sun was over there too. It's cool. Yeah, I think if we just even embed that in one of a line item, we don't have to call it out like website improvements. I don't know. Maybe we don't have to call it out like in the narrative so much, or maybe we do, but we could just like throw $5,000 in there and see, what we think as we sort of step through the process. At least it gives us some flexibility. And if they cut it, then that's fine too.
I like that.
So did I hear CC saying that they're almost done finalizing a climate action plan for the town?
They're almost done with the hazard mitigation plan, which really focuses on, has like flooding and drought and wildfires and all of that kind of stuff. And it's a FEMA,
Okay.
and they should be winding that down by the end of the summer, basically.
Okay.
But I think, and there's been a lot of input from various town staff on that, fire chief, police chief, us, conservation. And I think between that and the natural resources section of the master plan, there's actually quite a bit of material that's really available already to kind of form the, at least the bones of our update.
Definitely. That's what I was thinking about. Okay. So that's coming.
Yep. There's actually going to be a public, they're just finishing the first full draft. There's going to be a public presentation on that. Probably the select board ultimately will have to vote to approve it. So there's going to be a public presentation at a select board meeting, potentially or tentatively on June 11th. And then it needs FEMA approval and MEMA approval and all of that stuff before it's all done.
Thinking about the select board, just this is a non sequitur in a way, and I apologize, but I just picked up the fact that we all expire in terms of our appointments on June of this year. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think everybody's appointed through June 30th.
Until June 30th.
Yep.
So we all have to get reconfirmed. That's a very negative kind of image, isn't it? If you go and look and see what the Open Space Committee is doing, they're all sort of, about to expire, as I say. I was just picking up on Jim's comments in a slightly different way from earlier. I think you all know this. I have a very dim view of the town website because it's just doesn't work in terms of providing decent information. And I know there are problems and all the rest of it, but this has been going on for so long that it strikes me that there is either no real interest in solving it, or people really don't feel that it's a decent way of communicating. But it seems to me that increasingly it's one of the important ways of communicating with people. It's a place that people go because that's the information source for a lot of stuff and so on and so forth. So I would like us to, at any rate, press for that website to just be a better deal. Right now, if you go into the Open Space Committee, it's moribund. I mean, there's no sense that we're meeting. There's no sense that, you know, of any sort of activity.
David, I'm
Yeah.
just, I know we all don't love the website, but I will say we've got our agendas up, we've got our minutes up, we've got our active members up. So if you were on that page and looked, you'd see current meeting information and minutes as they've been approved. So they are up there. It's horrible looking. No one's gonna take the time to dive in. I totally agree that it's not a great vehicle for communicating. I absolutely agree with that. But what we're doing is represented there, so I just want to acknowledge that you all are, you know, you're doing your thing, you're like approving minutes and we're getting them up there. I do think the appointments for, like, again, for better for worse, they're annual appointments for most of the committees that are not elected. And they'll be coming up again in the select board's June meeting. So by the time this is submitted, you all, if you're interested, will be invited to get appointed again, and you will, I'm sure, get appointed again. So it's an archaic process, and we've been having some meetings recently about like how to improve it and whether we could do 3-year terms for certain committees, what that would take to have a charter set up. It's definitely, it's on people's minds, so that it's particularly when this happens, when you all just got appointed in March and then 2 months later, it's.
So there's some limitation in the town charter as to what you can do in terms of appointments? Is that what you're saying?
Some committees have parameters in a charter. They have a charter or they have a
Right.
bylaw, like the Ag Commission is very explicit with their membership. But
Mhm.
the Open Space Committee is not. So I think what the select board has done are annual appointments.
Yeah, because it would seem to me that what might make most sense is that you appoint people for the duration of the development and execution of the plan. And that is going to clearly take at least 2 calendar years, no matter how you put it together.
Right, and I think we did that with the master plan, you know, to point people for the duration of the plan.
Right. Yeah, you know, and also the master plan is a creature of the planning board anyway, which has a continuing life because it has overlapping. Anyway, you know, this is probably a topic for discussion in a smaller venue, but
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I mean, I'd love to put this on a future open space agenda, just to look again at the committee's mission and like explore if there are opportunities to like just have a more hands-on like policy, or, you know, I don't know exactly what the vehicle is, but I think it would be good to talk about, because I think it's anyway, you're not the only one who's been concerned about it. And I think if you want a committee that's actually vibrant and, you know, has people come on and people come off and there's work to do and there's like momentum, you know, you kind of need to build that up in a way that's a little bit more proactive. So I think it's a good topic, but yeah. I have another grant question for you all, and I want to be conscious that it's whatever, like evening. The grant, the one stop, one of the things they focus in particular on, besides resiliency and sustainability, which is a question in the application questions, is the public engagement piece. So I just want to, like, if you guys have 5 minutes to just kind of walk through what we think the best opportunities for engagement, like we have the parameters of what the workbook says, but just help me out a little with ideas that I can throw into the grant proposal of how we're gonna do such a great outreach and engagement plan.
Well, okay, it sounds a dumb question, but what do you mean by engagement? What does engagement mean? Are we taking some definition that the state gives us as to what engagement is, or? I'm not trying to nitpick, but,
Yeah.
what is it they're expecting, that we're gonna have? Well, as, Christina had suggested, things like attending, I think you did, Newbury Days and having a presence at, various town events and so on? Or are we talking about getting people who are what, leaders in conservation, da, 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 da. I mean,
Probably whatever we want. It's sort of a generic, thoroughly address and describe the project's public engagement plan. That's kind of all they give me.
And then did they
No.
have a requirement that you have to have at least one public meeting or in one
I think
survey? Were there some
Yeah,
two public
think-
meetings?
Yeah, I think it was 2 public meetings or something, and we had to document those in our plan and that kind of stuff. And, the survey would be public engagement, basically anything that's kind of reaching out, getting input.
I think setting some, I don't know if you actually are setting targets like metrics, but certainly maximizing participation in the survey across section of the population, which we kind of
Yeah.
talked about in the previous meeting, but.
Yeah, we don't have, so Newbury, the 2020 data doesn't have any EJ communities or regions, neighborhoods in Newbury. But to Cece's point, like thinking about, like you're saying, like demographically, maximizing participation.
Does any
Yeah.
data show that there are any other languages mostly spoken in Newbury that we need to accommodate in terms of like a public notice or something? Because then we would need translation services. Or do we?
Yeah, we just had that conversation today when we were talking about some of the transportation project outreach, and we don't think there is, at least it doesn't show up on the state website, but it probably is, right? Some neighborhoods, some people.
I'm just looking at
Okay.
this suggested timetable that's in the workbook, and I'm actually seeing 3 public meetings through the process, sort of one at the beginning, one in the middle, and one at the end. So that might be.
oh dear, I mean, that's wonderful, right? Oh dear, well, never mind.
Yeah,
that
I mean,
was-
I think our grant application is gonna generally say we're gonna follow the workbook. And then just, yeah,
Yeah, I
I
mean, we
think
can say that we're
we're in
gonna
good
leverage
shape.
the existing public notification system used by, the town of Newbury, which people sign up for emails, and we're gonna encourage people to sign up for the open space plan committee. I actually did write like a little blurb that could potentially be our, first little announcement, but I kind of like, David, what you were saying is that if someone were to go look, I don't know if they can even look, I guess I haven't looked myself, but if they saw that the people who were on the open space committee were expiring in a month, maybe we wait to do that on July 1st or in July instead of now, so that at least everybody has refreshed and they're on for another year, so they know that there's some consistency there. There's no, big rush in sending it out now, but we could send it out in July instead, it's a month and a half from now. But anyway, I did write a quick little blurb that I'm happy to, there's no chat in this window. I don't, unless I'm missing it.
No, it's disabled for our town meetings.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, I guess I'm technically not allowed to send it out to everybody. So, unless I send it right now while we're all on the public meeting. But maybe I'll send it over to you, Kristen, and anyway, we can,
I think you can send it out as long as we don't like discuss it,
yeah,
Right.
and we'll talk about it at the
except
next
on
meeting.
the public meeting.
Yeah, we'll
send
talk about it at the
Yeah,
next
just
meeting.
send it. Yeah.
Is it something that you might want to share on your screen right now? We could take a look at it.
Oh, yeah, I can do that too. Martha, you're always thinking, hold on. Let me share it.
Is that enabled, Martha?
It should be.
Okay.
Yeah, if you hovered over the bottom and see a green square that says share and press on that.
Yeah.
Click on it.
Pulling up the document, make sure it's in a good spot there. All right.
Don't know whether you noticed, but we all shifted around when the lightning came.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Oh, there it is. Good, you got it.
Yeah,
So yeah, I just looked at the way it was written on other ones, and this is not urgent if we decide we're not going to send it out till July. But I thought we could, the Open Space Committee is meeting regularly to update the Town of Newbury Open Space and Recreation Plan, and I was going to put a link to the Open Space and Recreation Plan. And if you're interested in keeping up with the progress, be sure to sign up. And then I put the subscribe alerts website to see the meeting dates and agenda items, and a survey to request input from the town is planned for later this year. Let's hear your voice. And we can,
I like it.
tear this apart, change it all around as needed. Just was getting a start on it.
No, I think that's great. And I think, doing it in the beginning of July, after the appointments are made would be great timing.
I like it.
Yeah, thank you for putting that together.
Yeah, I'll send it around in an email just in case we want to tweak it on the next meeting.
should we, and I know this has problems sometimes, but should we try to personalize this a little bit? It's very anonymous. The Open Space Committee, you can, in other words, should somebody's name be in there or names? At some point we would seem to me are going to go public in a real way. I'm just wondering whether, if you're encouraging people to follow something or to reach out, I think it's a place, I don't know, am I making any sense at all? I'm just thinking that, there are not lots, but there are a number of organizations in town which will in many ways have an interest in what this committee is doing. And we should have an interest in who they are and what they're doing. For example, I mean, we do have two of the most obviously known conservation related organizations in the town, namely Audubon, okay, that has a center, a brand, relative to Audubon, a brand new center in Newbury. We have the Wildlife Refuge, which is internationally known. Both of those have volunteer groups and support groups. Aren't those kind of people the kind of people you want to recruit into an interest level and a connective tissue sort of level to a group like this? I mean,
Yeah, I think we did. We touched on that on maybe not last meeting or the meeting before, and we kind of came up with a list of all the people, of all the organizations that we would want to send out some announcements to. And I don't, maybe it would be this first one, could be on the town website, and we could also send it out and they might be willing to post it on some of their updates as well. So maybe we look at the narrative, the words that were in that, and see if it's appropriate just for the town website, and if we wanted to change it for other external parties, or if we want to change it even for the town website, I'd say, yeah, let's put some thought to it.
Because I think, people, yeah, I mean, this is cynical, but people these days are looking for rewards. If they do something, they would like to have a reward for doing it. All right, be it financial or getting to know somebody or finding a place to go to or whatever. And it would seem to me that we need to bear that in mind, that if we're encouraging people to become interested in what we're doing, then there needs to be a reward. And I'm not sure what that could be a variety of things. But I think it needs to be able to take you. We live in a world of influencers. I'm sorry, but we do. And it needs to take you someplace. So I think, that's why, going back for a minute to the survey that I put together, I wanted people to get information, and that was the idea of having the map and as part of it and so on. And I think that anything we do that is comes under this sort of general heading of engagement has to have that kind of aspect to it. And that's why I rolled my eyes at the beginning, middle, and end kind of thing. I mean, that workbook is just so bad. It's not worth discussing anyway. Enough. So.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, I think we in Newbury are beneficiaries of all the other partner organizations. And enhancing those partnerships is a great benefit to all of us. I also think finding the people who are involved in any, don't know anything about the open space is a great goal for outreach, as well as connecting with the people who are already kind of knowledgeable. It's both. It's important. We can include, on that note, letters of support in the grant application. I've reached out a couple times to the chair of the rec committee, but haven't connected with him yet. I'm hoping they at least, or the chair at least, would be able to write a very brief letter and say, we're so happy the open space committee is taking the lead and we're very involved and supportive, yada, yada. What do people think about any other letters of support? Do we need them?
Yeah,
If we do
Jill,
need
can you get
them-
someone from Division of Marine Fisheries? Can you write a little letter for Division of Marine Fisheries? Would they also be supportive because we have so much salt marsh and so much tidal areas? Would DMF be willing to write a letter and maybe Essex County, Greenbelt?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, because of the fish run, I think that's the biggest thing. Is the Diogenes is really, the Parker River is a key part, key area here in the North Shore. So, absolutely, and then the shellfish too, for sure. Managing stormwater properly and maintaining the marsh. So I know 2 people off the top of my head that would be perfect for it.
Is that not a hard thing in an agency to get a little letter like that written, or?
No, if there's an example, that's even better. If I can say this is I don't know if we have access to that, but if I could share that with them, so this is what we're looking for, or even just point me to the link for the grant proposal so I can look at it, so I have a better idea.
Yeah, I can write a little draft template letter that can then be put on letterhead and, a couple sentences like you just said about particular components. But yeah, why don't I draft something? Is that, Mike, do you think Greenbelt stand on that?
Yeah, I think I can definitely have somebody from over there do that. I think having a template or some guidance there would be nice.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll just put something together. I mean, got some letters of support in the files from other projects that I can.
What about town groups such as the Historical Commission? I mean, all the kind of people who, the kind of activities that open space plans are supposed to be cognizant of according to the workbook. So wouldn't we solicit support from the chair of the Historical Commission, perhaps the planning group that's working on the Lower Green? I mean, all of those things, that would seem to me to be part of engagement. You're engaging other aspects of the town, you know, the town's functioning, put it that way.
Yeah, I don't, we're coming, this is due in a couple weeks, so we'll see, but I think that's a great idea to, just engage, and it's the added benefit of letting people know we're doing this and that kind of thing is good
Well, I
too.
think, you just mentioned a sort of template, boilerplate kind of thing. You could have something and explain that we have a time crunch. And would you be willing to just simply say, the Historical Commission supports this in principle or something?
Yeah,
That would indicate that we've done at least the beginning of due diligence of checking the boxes, which is the world they're living in Boston or wherever it is. Just
yeah,
go, because they're listed actually, I think, in the workbook, those kind of groups. And so you need
yeah,
their professed support.
yeah, and it's partially responsible for some of the action items in the last plan, I think.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so
Sounds-
Ella, are you ready to write this thing? I'm totally kidding. But it'll be, I'd love another set of eyes, so it'll be super helpful. Maybe next Tuesday we can like put our heads together. Be awesome.
Any help I can give, I'm happy to do anything.
And translate all of this, like, yeah, put it together. All right, team, what else is on our agenda? I think we should, I'm trying to find my agenda.
We have to accept the meetings, the minutes from the previous meeting.
Yep.
And maybe set our next agenda.
Does anyone want to make a motion about minutes?
Sure. I will.
Good. Any seconds?
Second.
All those in favor of accepting the May 7th minutes?
I'm sorry, it's a Zoom meeting, so we have to do it by roll call.
We have to
Okay,
do
yeah.
what?
We have to do it by roll call because it's a Zoom meeting, sorry.
Oh, right. Okay,
Can we just go around like Christina Hoffman, yes?
Sure.
David Powell,
Yeah.
yes.
Mike,
Mike Carboni, yes.
Jim? I guess you're actually not official, but you can,
Right.
how do you feel about them? You good?
I'll say yes, even though I'm not an official member.
Okay, I'm a yes.
Yes. All right. Minutes approved by roll call vote. And so I'm not sure, well, when would people like to meet next?
Well,
And
I'm,
how do
yeah.
people feel about entrusting me to just submitting this thing or wanting to spend the time to review drafts and that kind of stuff?
I'm happy to review the draft. So, if you want to send me the draft and if you need any help on any specific pieces of it, feel free to ping me. Happy to chip in to get that application put together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That'd be great. So maybe we could meet, this is the third Tuesday of May. The third Tuesday of June would be the 18th. How's that look?
That works for me. June 18th.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to make that. I have a retirement party for my boss. That night.
Can't miss that.
Yeah.
No, you can't. And I actually think that I'm gonna be traveling for work right now. It's so up in the air, but I will also possibly be in Texas that week. But that's not to say, yeah, that you have to schedule around me or Bill.
Well, I guess we should discuss what would be on the agenda and then think about when we need to meet. And if it works to do a doodle poll, we could do that as well. I know summer, you know, that end of June, beginning of July gets busy for people sometimes.
Have we officially enlisted MVPC? Where are we at with, I mean, we had CC come. Are we going to have to make a official decision to do that, or to do that if we can afford it, or whatever? I mean, where is that in terms of activity?
Yeah, well, I think if it makes sense, it seemed like we're leaning towards having her revise the scope of work based on what we talked about tonight and based on the Georgetown. And, you know, again, Martha and I can go a little back and forth with her about, you know, just making sure the buckets of tasks make sense from what we think the
Mhm.
needs are.
Right.
But there's no, you know, there's no obligation of us to use them. We won't have to contract with them or do anything official with MVPC until and after we receive the grant.
Okay.
If we didn't receive the grant for some reason, we would not be obligated to any particular timeline with them. I mean, I think we would want to continue to work on the update in some other ways, but
Yeah, can their proposal just state that they would, this proposal is valid until, you know, October 1st or something, so that or you guys maybe have such a good relationship with them that that's maybe goes without saying. That, you know, some proposals come in and they say this is valid for 60 days, or this is valid for 30 days or 90 days. And so I just want to make sure that the person who's reviewing our grant application sees that the proposal is valid until a date after they plan on announcing.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that two things. One is that she would be very, you know, flexible, and certainly, you know, it's not going to be, it's only good for 60 days and that's it, then we're not interested. And it may be that the scope of services, once we actually get the grant, would need to be tweaked a little bit anyway, so.
What's a typical turnaround? Any idea on the grant? After we apply, I guess.
I think they say the awards are late summer. And then usually it's later than what they say. I'm just like seeing if I can bring it up here.
Thinking of like at the next meeting and then what we can do. So Christina wrote a blurb. That would be great to get out after we're reappointed, say in July, but we're also going to be directing attention to the website, as David alluded to. And I think that's the other area that if we are interested in improving that, you know, that's something that we could meet about next and look at the website and say, what material do we want to add to it? You know, there's like, I don't know, David talked about what's the reward, what's in it for me, but I mean, as we all know, there's a lot in it for the public to maintain open space. So maybe that's the carrot, if you can educate a little bit about the importance of open space and the rural character of the town. So that would be something we could maybe put into on the website. Just a thought. So, but between that and before we get the grant, I mean, we're kind of like waiting on the grant to really move forward.
I like that idea of the website, and you know, it ties obviously into engagement, and it's really more the committee, right? The ongoing relaunch of the committee goes beyond the plan itself, and right, what is our, not to get too lofty, but our mission and vision, and just making sure that that's clear to the public to help foster the engagement and so on.
That sounds good. And I just want to correct myself. It actually says the awards aren't announced till September and then contracting in October into November. So we're probably looking at November before we actually. So to that point, yes, there are some other things we can talk about and work on until we actually dive into the grant
Maybe
funded
that could be
portion
our
of it.
agenda item for our next meeting is what can we work on between now and November? Make that list.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, how seriously do we think that we want to get a reaction from the community to give us some idea of what it is that people are concerned about still, or have become, you know, in other words, is the beginning survey something that we should do prior to actually starting work on this, on the, you know, the nitty-gritty data substance of the plan? It would seem to me that, you know, are we going to represent the community by knowing some stuff about what they think, or are we just going to be a committee that decides we know what to do? You know, that's what I'm wondering here, because if there is this sort of pause, this kind of interregnum where we can't be doing any work that costs money, or something, that's what I'm sort of hearing, then what are we doing? You know, I mean, to me, there's so much to be done. Among other things, reaching out to some of these organizations, and you know, in terms of what their input might be or not be, as the case might be. I certainly can, for example, I think, scare up a letter fairly quickly from the trustees, because now at least finally the major was it he's now a vice president, I think, of the and he's the director for the Northeast region, and you will know him, Kristen, that's Peter Pinciero. And I'm sure that Peter, who has actually a rather special interest in Old Town Hill and Newbury as a community, would be happy to provide a letter of endorsement, saying, you know, that this is good. And I think lots of other organizations need to be contacted in this way. And it concerns me a little that you say you've reached out twice to the rec committee and haven't heard back. I mean, don't they understand what the open space recreation plan is? Or are they, I mean, you have any sense? I mean, they were happy to appear before the select board, right? With a very good plan for the rec fields. Is that,
Yeah, I think we'll be able to engage them. I just, you send an email, it gets buried, and it wasn't like there wasn't a specific deadline or a specific ask. It was, hey, I'm letting you know, we're doing this. Are you interested? But I think we'll be able to get their engagement. There's that word again, and support.
well, I mean, frankly,
But we might have to have someone go to their next meeting. I mean, that would be
Yeah.
a good way to do
they
it.
have to play ball. It's not
Yeah.
a question of they might like to, they have to. Sorry, but that's the case. And I would start, I'll do it if you like, whoops. And that is, I was intrigued by the plan they put forward, which totally ignored the fact that there was that Boy Scout trail and came up with a weird idea of having a canoe launch in a place that's so tidal, I think you'd be covered in mud for 75% of the day. But anyway, I'll get a hold of him and find out, whether he even knows that we exist. I'll do that in the next couple of days.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I think it's, we're getting going, so I think, they have their charge, but I know they did meet a couple weeks ago, and I just didn't get it on my calendar to attend, but maybe finding out when their next meeting is and seeing if we can have that conversation, and that'd be great, David, if you have time to do that.
Sure. Yep.
Thank you.
Great.
Um,
So our agenda item for the next one is to kind of talk about what should we do between now and November, including all of the outreach.
Right.
perfect. I like it.
And that public engagement, that sort of plays into the proposal to Kristen, in terms of the public engagement, like the one survey, 3 public meetings, flyers, but then also connecting with, all of these town departments, X, Y, and Z, and with these organizations that already have a really deep tie to the town of Newbury, like the trustees and Essex County, and maybe even, I'm happy to go over to Parker River Wildlife Refuge, talk with those folks just to let them know, that what we're up to. But just listing that we're going to be doing that outreach might be also part of our compelling argument that they should give us some money because we're going to be so great.
Yeah, and it is, we'll put the timeline in the grant application, but part of the pitch is we're ready. What's your readiness and what's your, capacity, and what have you done so far? So all of this story that we're talking about, we can get going on. But yeah, the spending money to do X, Y, and Z, we'll wait till November. We can start other things earlier. So, okay. So since we have some homework, we have appointments happening in June. We have some people traveling. I am traveling a little bit as well. Maybe we look to after July 4th for our next meeting, but we can set that up if that makes sense. By email. That sound good?
That does.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah. Are you going to send out anything for our review in terms of what it is you're sending to the state?
Yeah, well, Christina just offered to review that. I'd be happy to share that more broadly, if people are interested and have the time. I can do that.
Well, I just think, I mean, I find this whole process a little bit opaque, but that's okay. But it would be helpful if essentially, I think we know about, what it is we're saying we want money for. And how, what an application like this looks like, because it all becomes part of the process. And if somebody's saying, well, what are you doing as a committee? Well, one of the things we're doing as a committee is to help and encourage the staff to put in this, right? I mean, that's part of it. That's part of the news.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah,
We're just doing about 80 other things at the same time, so. As soon as I get a good draft, I'm happy to share it, and I'm always happy to get input on it. It's gonna just probably be a little bit of a crunch with things going on, so. But I think it's not, we've got it. We've just spent a good hour and a half talking about like what we want to be doing, and I think it's a great project and it's highly competitive for this funding, so I think we'll be in good shape.
well,
But it's
yeah,
a little opaque because I haven't actually gotten in the portal yet. So I've looked at templates, but you have to like get the password and get in the portal and, input the thing, and they don't give you a word, whatever, you get the drift.
Maybe
Um,
Ella could help with that. She could like go and explore it and download all the things and like create them as PDFs so that you can then review them that way. I don't know, just a thought.
Yes, and she started helping with that 2 weeks ago, but we had to have the town administrator actually get into the portal, and then we become users, and it's just whatever, it's fine. It won't be hard once we get in there, so. I've got all the questions now, so we're in good shape. We're just gonna get going on it this week, so.
Cool. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah.
yeah.
And this is good because now that it's this one stop, it funds like everything. So it's absolutely, it's the first time I've used the one stop program, but there's a million different planning related projects that can get funding through this particular portal and process. So there's a huge benefit to Newbury Beyond. Newbury's never submitted through the one stop before for anything. So we're the pioneers, and it's awesome to have all the support from you guys. And I think it'll be good.
Great.
Cool. That's awesome. That's
You
exciting.
see, that's just the kind of information which we didn't have before, which is good, which is great. In other words, that there's some groundbreaking going on in terms, and it's the open space, this is how you do it, isn't it, Christina? It's the open space committee that's leading the way, right? And using I'm doing a press release off the top of my head, but that's the kind of stuff that you can share with people that shows that you're tied into a process. That's the way my head works. And maybe it shouldn't, but it does.
Yeah, no, that's juicy stuff. We should we could maybe roll it into our announcement. At least we'll have it on our page, added to our webpage.
Right. Yeah.
And just I don't want to give the impression, because MVPC applies for grants all the time, that, as Martha said at the beginning of this meeting, we are the beneficiary of doing these incredible planning projects through them. So there's been a lot of work that's funded through the state in really positive ways. It's just this particular entrance point that's new.
It's another add for you, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I'm sort of running out of time here, so if
Yep.
we move along.
Does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn? That's our last agenda item.
I move that we adjourn, as long as we're clear about the fact that we're gonna be discussing what we're gonna be doing, as Christina put it, before November, at the next meeting. And presumably agenda items can be added prior to the meeting, yes? Or prior to you posting the agenda.
I would be happy to have any input on the next agenda, so yes.
Yeah. That's, basically the way I think it could work is that we don't have to feel that the agenda is fixed now if things come up or whatever. If I can get to talk to the rec guys, I may have an item to report on.
Sounds great.
Good.
I'll second.
Does
that.
anyone want a second? Yeah. Christina. Thank you. Roll call vote. Kristen, I.
Mike, I.
Bill, aye.
Martha, I.
Jim, if I should be.
Do I vote even though I seconded the motion already, or is that my vote?
No, it's okay.
You still vote.
I still vote. Thank you for the rules. Christina, I.
And,
Yes, I from David Powell, yep. So.
Great. All right, thanks, everybody.
Have a great night,
Thanks.
everybody.